Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Jay Stevens Podcast. This is episode number 110, dedicated to a woman who on July 2nd, 1927, beat Spaniard Lily Alvarez to win her first of 8 Wimbledon titles, Miss Helen Willis Moody. And as always, thanks for listening and downloading to the episode of the podcast. On today's episode, we are joined by Mr. Ryan Roberts, once again, Director of Scouting for NFL Draft Bible, to talk about the draft-eligible quarterbacks for the upcoming 2021 NFL Draft. And this has been an exciting time. Like I mentioned earlier, we are in a series, you may want to say, of having different guests come on to get us ready for the upcoming NFL Draft. We had Ms. Grace Rayner on, Clemson beat writer for The Athletic, on last week, Ryan Roberts today. I believe next week is the Dallas Cowboys. The week after that is the Chicago Bears. Exciting things happening around both of those squads, so it'll be exciting to kind of have a deep dive to go into what is going on with those particular teams. 2 quick announcements before we get to the conversation I had with Mr. Ryan Roberts. This is the last episode that'll be on the MTMV Sports Podcast Network and the MTMV Sports Podcast Network listening podcast feed. So if you want to continue, if you're part of that family, part of that group, and you want to continue to listen to the Jay Stevens Podcast on a regular basis, search the Jay Stevens Podcast on your podcast listening platform, the one of your choosing, and you'll be able to find this podcast in the same form. Nothing changes. At least 2, sometimes 3 times a week. So my time with MTMV has been fun, but every good thing has to come to an end at some point, and this is that end point with our time together. Also, the Buckeye Beat with Jay Stevens. I know I have announced it before, but the Buckeye Beat with Jay Stevens, a new podcast that will be found on the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. That'll be coming up next week. So search Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network on your favorite podcast listening platform, and you'll be able to catch that there. That'll be dropping next week. Be focused on my Twitter page at jstevens07, and you'll be able to find all the details about that show there. So, last time with MTMV Sports Podcast Network, it has been fun, and you'll be able to catch the Jay Stevens Podcast on the same app you're listening to this one right now. Just go ahead and search the Jay Stevens Podcast. You'll find that, and then exciting times on the Buckeye Beat with Jay Stevens, a part of the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. Be looking out for that as well. Let's go ahead and take a trip to Burlington, New Jersey, to once again enjoy a fun conversation with Mr. Ryan Roberts, Director of Scouting for NFL Draft Bible, as we look at the draft-eligible quarterbacks for the 2021 NFL Draft. Hey, Ryan, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate you having me on, man. It's always a pleasure being able to catch up. Just talking some ball, man. Nothing's happening right now, so appreciate you having me back.
Yeah, man, no problem. I really appreciate you coming back on. Since the last time we had you here on the podcast, you've had some things going on with your job with NFL Draft Bible, and then some other shows. I was actually able to listen to you, Joe, and Alex earlier today talk about the 2021 running back class. Tell a little bit about, I know I kind of dumped some stuff out there, but tell the listeners what's new with you in your life, then also some things you're doing with podcasts and things like that.
Yeah, sure. Just from a personal level, trying to get through everything that's happening right now, with continued stuff with the pandemic and just trying to work through everything. But, as you mentioned, a small promotion, I would call it. It's nothing extreme. I'm kind of doing the same work I really was doing NFL Draft Bible. It's just, a nicer sounding Director of Scouting term or whatever. So all good there. Like you said, Believe Podcast Network. We were over at the Brawl Network. So we just are literally taking our podcast over to a different network just because Believe we think is a great platform, and we're kind of excited. Like you said, Alex Gilstrap, Jody Leone, and myself are just talking some NFL draft. It's called Believe in NFL Draft Prospects, and that first episode dropped today. So if you haven't heard it with the running back group, anybody out there listening, take a listen. We're really excited just about the content we're putting out there. And man, it's it just got hired by Pro Football Network as well. I'm doing some pieces on the Browns with Jeff Lloyd and a couple other great guys on Twitter. So just trying to expand a little bit, dip in a couple different markets, and I'm just really excited. It's a lot of work, not much free time right now, but it's a ton of fun. So.
It is. And for all the listeners out there, when I tweet out the link to this episode that you're listening to, I'll also under that tweet the link to the Believe episode when Ryan, Alex, and Joe talk about the 2021 running back draft class. I thoroughly enjoyed that, Ryan. Now, would that be a weekly thing, a bi-weekly thing? How many times a week will that particular one come out?
Yeah, so I mean, first of all, I appreciate the compliment there, and it's going to be twice a week thing. So how it's going to work is on Tuesdays. Right now, we're going to do a positional preview. So like next week will be wide receivers moving on from running backs, but Thursday this week, and it's going to kind of be a running trend every week. We're going to have an interview segment, which this week Joe interviewed Justin Covington, who's a running back out of Villanova. I interviewed Charles Williams, who's a running back out of UNLV. So we're going to kind of give you some prospect interview segments along with the weekly podcast as well. So Tuesday's podcast, Thursdays are going to be our prospect spotlight interview kind of section.
Yeah, and I would thoroughly enjoy you guys checking that out. I'm very picky with the podcast that I pick. And before I came across Ryan on Twitter and the other two guys, Alex and Joe, I didn't listen to any draft prospect, any draft analysis podcast because most guys bored me. But you guys put it out there in a fun way. It's very fun because you and Alex go back and forth sometimes comparing each other's draft boards and how you guys are ranking people. But it's very fun to just see you, Joe, Alex, listen to it. Listen to you guys literally just go back and forth, sharing the knowledge, sharing what you see, and then also just kind of pushing each other. I think Alex said that he had watched 30 running backs. I was like, dude, are you crazy? Like, it's June. But he was like, that's the first thing I've done. But that just shows like how dedicated you guys are to providing great analysis. How has this – we'll get into quarterbacks here in a second. But how has this period, this summer, either been the same for you or been different with COVID-19?
I mean, so it's been pretty standard for myself. You know, it's right now is the summer scouting, so you're just grinding right now as many guys as you can, just so you can kind of get a comprehensive, large scope picture of the entire draft in general. I know in the scouting world, though, like team scouting, you know, guys that are working for an NFL team specifically, it's a very different world. You know, they are usually getting ramping up for campus visits. Who knows what's going to happen for that? I think the scouting world in general is going to kind of get put on top of their head here, trying to figure out things day by day, you know, with no campus visits and the All-Star game crews, you know, the Senior Bowls and stuff, making those visits over to different campuses and stuff. I don't think that's going to be a thing. So it's going to be kind of the average Twitter scout is going to be watching a lot of film. So for myself, with how I do it with NFL Draft Bible is I wouldn't really get out into the campuses until like game visits anyway. So right now, this summer period's been pretty standard. And, you know, as always, just enjoying the process right now.
Speaking of the process, kind of good segue there. This 2021 draft class, how have you specifically viewed this draft class, comparing it to last football season? I know it's going a little bit – when comparing it last football season, when getting ready for knowing these guys will be draft eligible at one point, how have they progressed? Who maybe has stood out? No, let's do it this way first. I'll get to the standout point in a second. How have these guys – has anything changed from the beginning of the last year until this year, or if things kind of stayed the same for the most part?
I think the really cool thing is I actually love comparing like back-to-back classes. So like 2020 to 2021, just because we just got done with 2020. So like that stuff is fresh in my mind. You know, people aren't asking me to pull up like a 2017 scouting report, right? Like we're comparing like almost a mirror image. So like I'm looking at the 2020 compared to 2021, and there are definitely some similarities in the sense of wide receiver group is amazing again. You know, it is a dynamite group, but then it's really nice to get those groups where you're like, oh man, thank God we're getting a little influx of talent. Because like last year's tight end crew was rough. Yeah. This year's tight end class, at least the top three, is exceptional. And the safety group, you know, last year was okay. This year's safety group is really nice. Linebacker group this year is better than 2020. I feel very confident in that. So I just love being able to compare the back-to-back classes because you can really see the differences very quickly. You know, I feel like most comparisons you have to go and look back at your notes and, you know, just think a little too much. For this, it's like a quick recollection of that position group. I like it a lot more than where I was this past year. And, you know, just early impressions. I like 2021, man. There's a lot of talent coming out. So I'm excited just to dig a little deeper in here with you.
When you have looked at specifically the quarterbacks, we're going to take the rest of the time talking about those, specifically the quarterbacks in this draft class, what do you see?
I see a lot of tools. You know, it's the 2020 group. Like Tua was very talented. There was Jordan Love was very talented. Justin Herbert was very talented. Those guys kind of hit the high marks in pure athletic ability, arm strength, those types of things. But the top of the class was Joe Burrow because he was just so refined, But like this, you go down the top three guys that we're talking about, I'm sure, very early in this show here, and Trevor Lawrence, quarterback from Clemson, Justin Fields, quarterback from Ohio State, and Trey Lance, quarterback from North Dakota State. Those guys all check those boxes. I don't see a big riser in the sense of I don't see somebody overtaking Trevor Lawrence as quarterback 1 or even maybe Justin Fields as 2 or 3 or whatever it is. I feel like those 3 guys are going to end up in kind of a rarity to be the final 3, but it's just really nice to be able to see that the talent at the top. After those 3 gets a little murky, that's where you're kind of throwing darts. Like, I think this guy could be quarterback 4. I think this guy could be quarterback 5. But it's been such a refreshing thing to be able to see not only these guys at the top that have, the mental acumen, have the off the fields, that people speak their praises, but also the talent matches. Everything that we've heard of Trevor Lawrence is true. Everything we've heard of Justin Fields is true. Trey Lance is the question mark because he's coming from a smaller school, but everything we've heard about him from what I've seen so far is also true.
You mentioned a couple things. They have tools. You look for tools, and they check the boxes. So with the quarterback, and I'm going to ask you to describe Trey Lance here very quickly after this part, the part about the checking the boxes, because Trey Lance is kind of the guy we know about Trevor Lawrence, we know about Justin Fields, but Trey Lance is a guy that you hear North Dakota State, you hear about winning program, but no one really watches FCS schools, so no one really knows about him. So I'll ask you to highlight him very quickly here in a second. What boxes are you looking for with the quarterback saying these are the boxes and they check all of them?
So quarterback is the most grueling, I don't know if grueling is the right word, but it's the most in-depth evaluation process because I don't just watch the film on quarterbacks. I go and I try to find everything I can when it comes to interviews with them speaking, interviews with players speaking about them, coaches speaking about them. It's my favorite group to interview because I like to hear them talk football, schematically. I want to hear what type of person they are. There's so many things that go into being the potential face of a franchise. It's not just, hey, man, he's on the field. He can read 1, 2, 3, go through his progressions, hit the open man accurately. Like, those things are obviously paramount to playing the position. But it's the things between the ears, It's the stuff off the field. This is a guy that no matter if he is that quote-unquote vocal leader off the field, he is a leader by default. You are the face of a franchise. So it's so tough, man, because, like, most of the time I can't even tell you if a quarterback's going to be really successful until I see what the situation he's landing in. But these guys, from everything I've seen, every interview I've heard, the most in-depth evaluation of this quarterbacks, I think a couple of these guys really have it, man. And it's really nice to see, but it also makes it tough because, you can't just watch the film and say, hey, man, that's it. That guy's good. You have to listen to everything. There is going to be ups and downs, especially at the quarterback position. And, it's very cliche, but it's how a guy, reacts to being knocked down. If he can get up, if he can do those types of things to elevate the players and the organization around him.
I understand that. And Trey Lance, I had heard another individual say, this Trey Lance guy, he may be the best. I don't know if you said these words, not you specifically, but someone said this Trey Lance guy, he has the possibility to be the best quarterback in this draft class. And I was thinking, okay, well, you already have Trevor Lawrence. You already have Justin Fields. I went to a website, and they had Jamie Newman number 4. And so I know when you go from Lawrence to Fields to Newman, there is a drop-off significantly from the top 2 to the other one. Well, I say from the other 2. Well, Lance was above Newman, and a lot of people may be wondering, I know about Jamie Newman. Below Newman on this site was Kellen Mond, Sam Ellinger, KJ Costello. So I heard about all these guys. And this Trey Lance guy, he's different. I like different. People thinking I like different. But when it comes to NFL quarterbacks, I don't want a guy to be drafted in the first round by my favorite team that I know nothing about. What makes Trey Lance so special?
Yeah, so if I had to rank them today, which I don't really do because I don't do full evaluations in the summer. I just do, I have my notes, strengths, where I need to see improvement in, that type of thing, just a couple little tidbits about the player, that type of thing. But right now, if I was ranking them, I'm pretty sure that I would have Trey Lance as quarterback 2. And that is just because from a mental processing perspective, and I know people talk about, hey, man, it's pretty easy to play in that offense, being able to be, on a dominant football team for the level. And I get that. He doesn't get pressed into adverse situations in an incredible degree, but I've seen him go through 1, 2, 3 reads. I've seen him, look guys off. I've seen him be able to do those mental things from a pre-snap perspective. I've seen him go under center, which it's not so much of like, hey, being able to take a snap. It's the ball handling aspect, different play actions, different handoffs, different things, different footwork. I've seen him do more than I've seen Justin Fields do right now. So you couple that fact of that he's asked to do a decent amount of things, and then you add in the fact of like, hey, man, this guy's 6'3", this guy's 224 pounds, this guy's athletic, this guy has a cannon for an arm. Maybe, besides Trevor Lawrence, I think he probably has the second best arm in this class. There's some throws on film that he's throwing 70 easy. Like it doesn't even look difficult. So when you add in that athletic profile with the ability of him to do multiple things at this stage in his career, I'm going to take a gamble on that right now, even though the level isn't great, because he is, it's not like he looks good against FCS opponents. He looks like he's like 2 cuts above these guys. He's the best athlete every time he's on the field, and I'm buying into it, man. I really am. There's a lot to like there, and it obviously helps him a little bit that Carson Wentz has been successful coming from the same program. We've seen transition. So I'm buying all Trey Lance stock right now. Not quarterback 1 for me, but he's firmly probably in that quarterback 2 conversation.
So on my list here, I got quarterback 2 on your list, and I recently talked to and had a beat writer, a Clemson beat writer on, and asked her, it was a female, I asked her this question: what makes Trevor Lawrence so special? So with you, she sees him from a different aspect than you do. You scout, she's there with the team on a day-to-day basis. What, in your eyes, makes Trevor Lawrence special?
So it's the easy things to say. You see the 6'6" plus, you see the 220, you see an athlete, you see an incredible arm. Like those things are very easy to just watch film and say like, hey, those are the quote unquote boxes, right? But then it's hearing him in interviews. It's the stuff with everything that was happening with the riots and everything, and the Black Lives Matter movement, him standing up and being outspoken in those situations. This guy is a natural-born leader on top of being this talented, which you don't see sometimes. It could be easy for this guy to be very full of himself, to be, he is the golden boy, right? People are already calling him the best quarterback to come out since Andrew Luck, and he might be that. But it's not just the fact of, hey, you can quantify all those things that he does, but then it's the things behind the scenes. It's the leadership ability. It's the spirituality that he brings. He's just cut from a different cloth. And for me, he's clear-cut quarterback 1. And I think that, despite the fact that there are times on film where he wants to do too much, he has a God-given arm where not many people have ever had it. And he thinks that he can make every play, which – if we watch Brett Favre back in the day, can come back to hurt you sometimes, and it comes back to hurt Trevor Lawrence big time. So there's some things that he needs to clean up, but, man, you can't watch Trevor Lawrence and listen to Trevor Lawrence and not think that you have something special there.
Justin Fields, want to keep with your top 3 once again. And after this, we're going to go right into some sleepers, some guys people may be sleeping on. But Justin Fields, his numbers last year jumped off the page. I mean, you couldn't watch a game and then look at the box score afterwards and be like, wow, this guy's going to be a first-round pick. He's going to have a chance to be an NFL starter someday, Pro Bowler. I mean, these are just things that the new age person says when looking at a box score, because a lot of people don't know how to look at box scores and say, oh, the box score says this, they had that kind of game. No, watch the game, watch the film. Maybe the box score doesn't show the full story of how that person played that in that game. But Justin Fields, he's a special player. But how do you think he can improve his draft stock?
It's a little tough just because it was a similar thing with Dwayne Haskins coming out, and it's not a comparison directly because Justin Fields is much more talented than Dwayne Haskins. I think his arm's stronger. I think he's much more athletic. It's not a direct comparison. It's a comparison in the fact of Ohio State has a very simplistic offensive structure. There is a whole lot of mesh crossing routes. There's a lot of easy reads. There's not a lot of tight window throws. And that honestly, while it might fill up the box score that you're talking about, right? It fills up the stat sheet. It's not fully translatable to the NFL because those windows are not going to be that open. So in no fault to Justin Fields' own, there is not a lot of tight window throws. Ohio State has no need to change their offense because it works. But from an NFL draft perspective, like I'm waiting to see a throw where I see a window that is an NFL quote unquote NFL throw. I'm waiting to see it. Justin Fields has all the tools though, so you're going to gamble on it. It's just a simple fact. I think that he's a guy that when he gets in the NFL, there's going to be that quote unquote trial and error period where you have to kind of bring him along a little slowly. But in the long term, the dividends are going to play huge because, you don't make guys this athletic with this type of arm strength too often, even though we have 3 guys in this class, which is why I'm super excited in this class overall.
Yeah, I feel that. Who are some guys, I don't care how many you have when you list this off, who would you say would fit your sleeper category with this year's quarterback class?
Sleepers. So let's go. First guy I like a good amount is Stanford kid Davis Mills. He took over for KJ Costello, who transferred to play with Mike Leach at Mississippi State this year. Davis Mills was a really high recruit, like 5-star by some publications. There is a lot of talent there. He is a 6'4" signal caller. He took over for KJ Costello, and he outplayed Costello by a large margin, who, if you were around for scouting summer last year, there was a lot of hype about Costello going into 2019 season. So Davis Mills outplayed him. Davis Mills did a lot of nice things. I really like tools that he has to work with. He has some good changing of arm speeds. He throws with good touch. There's a lot to work with there. So I'm a big fan of him. That's kind of my pick to be that guy, because I know a lot of guys are talking about Kyle Trask. They're talking about Jamie Newman as being that. Could there be a Joe Burrow-esque climb this year in the quarterback class? But for me, I think that's the guy that if everything kind of clicks from this year, he could have that potential rise. And then if I want to throw one more guy out, I don't know if he'll be in the 2021 cycle just because he's only a true junior and he's playing in the AAC conference, the American Athletic Conference, and that's Holton Allers that plays at Eastern Carolina, ECU. Okay. Now, he's a little unorthodox. He's not going to be for everyone. He's a lefty. He's a big lefty. He's like 6'3", 235 pounds. Pretty nice athlete, though. He's one of the best athletes every time he's on the field, and he has a relatively strong arm. It's just there is, a slow processing at times, and then he's got a very funky release. He's kind of like the Phillip Rivers lefty version. So some guys are going to knock him for the release. It's a little slow, but there's some arm strength to work with there, and then there's a really nice athlete. So Holton Allers, Davis Mills are kind of a couple guys that I like a little bit. Who do you think, and I'm going to say this really quickly and then get to one guy that I don't think either of us have mentioned yet. Who do you think is – and I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to say anyone's going to have a horrible season, but who do you think is in a good spot now that may fall off in this upcoming football season? If I had to pick one, I'd probably go Kellen Mond from Texas A&M. He's been kind of a guy. It was similar to like Brian Lewerke that came out of Michigan State last year. Like for 2 years, people were like, "Hey man, this guy's good. Like he could be good. He could be good." And like he was at an okay level, and then he just completely fell off. The last like year and a half he played, and it was just like, all right, undrafted free agent, see what he has, I guess, in camp. And I don't know if Kellen Mond's going to quite have that bad of a regression, but he's just been kind of the same guy for me over the last couple years. I haven't seen a ton of improvement. There are tools to work with. He makes some bucket throws that are, quote, special. He's a nice athlete. There are some things to work with. I don't think he's a quick enough processor. I think his release is a little long. I'm not buying into it right now. I think there's so much for him to grow that I don't know if it's going to be the season that he quite wants, playing in the SEC against the best teams in college football week in and week out.
I got you. I got 3 guys. I'm going to wrap it up with these 3. And I don't know how long we're going to go on these guys. I know I had some comments about Sam Ehlinger myself and how he kind of went into last season. Texas is back. I think it was at 2018 Cotton Bowl. Texas is back, and then 2019 was the 2019 season. But let's just stick there. Sam Ehlinger. I'll go to Kyle Trask here in a second. But Sam Ehlinger, he talks. I don't put much stock into talking. I am also a guy, I'll say that I was hoping that the Texas Longhorns would go back to the way they were when I was a kid so I could once again root for that team down there in the Big 12 and the team that I root for in the Texas-Oklahoma rivalry. I was literally hoping he would take the next step last season to be consistent, more consistent there, but the season was what it was. Sam Ehlinger, to you, what do you see and how do you project him?
Well, it's really funny, man, because, you talked about Texas is back. I feel like Texas has been back for like 4 years now, and it still hasn't. I'm waiting, man, because, I'm like you. I remember that Rose Bowl with Vince Young and Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush. I'm like, dude, let's
so much fun.
Bring that back, man. That was fun, It was so much fun just being a young football fan at that point. But Sam Ehlinger, he's not very good. I'm going to say that as nicely as I like. not very good. I mean,
you guys can't see his face, but he's trying very, very hard to hold that in, but he couldn't keep his thoughts in his head. No, go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
No, man, you're fine. I probably needed a break, to be honest, for a second. Man, he's 6'3", 230. He's a big, strong, athletic kid. He just doesn't have the arm. He just doesn't have a special arm. He's not a quick processor. His accuracy is all over the place. He's not an NFL quarterback. As mean as that's going to sound, in my opinion, he's just not. Could he be an NFL athlete though? And I hate to have that conversation about position switches, but the kid's a big physical athlete, so he might potentially have that opportunity. I don't think it's going to come at quarterback though. I really don't. If you want to try to make him into the Taysom Hill gadget dude, whatever. Possibility, because he has some athletic tools to work with. It's not great, man. And that's a great point, Jay, because that's one big guy right there that you can point to and say, don't scout the box score, because the box score will tell you that Sam Ehlinger is good, but the eyes tell you that he's just a solid college quarterback who is a good runner. That's just what he is. So.
And I mentioned the box score earlier. Ryan just mentioned it again. As a kid, Ryan, I was a guy in high school. I was a sports nerd. I carried around the newspaper in my back pocket. Even when I worked my first job, people knew that if Jay works the morning, if Jay was opening Starbucks, he would sit down. I didn't drink coffee, so I would just sit down, take a break, get out the USA Today, because the Indy Star wasn't – I don't know why I didn't get the Indy Star. It was local. But I'd get the USA Today and read it. And I would go read some articles. I read some local stuff, some high school stuff, big high school guy here in Indianapolis. And then all of a sudden, the box score. And that was where I, as a high school kid, spent most of my time. LeBron had this many points. Kobe had that many points. This guy threw that many interceptions. He threw for 500 yards. And, that's what popped out to me. And now as I'm older, I'm in my early 30s, just had a birthday, so I hope I'm getting wiser. But at the same time, even late 20s, I'm like, the box score, I don't care about the box score. I don't care about that. Yeah, 50 points is great. Yeah, 400 passing yards is great. It's great, but how does that produce on the field to wins? You can do all you want with the touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Justin Fields, I think it was before the Clemson game, 40 touchdowns, 1 INT. But as you said so well about Justin Fields, the offense kind of fit it. And I think myself, I don't know how it is when you're talking to other scouts and things like that, but I try to tell people all the time, don't focus on the box score, because that doesn't tell you the whole story.
Absolutely. And, I'm kind of the same guy. I used to be obsessed with Pro Football Reference, so I would just look up colleges, where they went to college, all the stats, try to memorize football stats. I was that nerdy statistician guy, I guess, growing up. But so stats don't tell context.
Right.
There's no context to stats. You're looking at a stat and you see a stat line that might be good. Well, who's around the player? Who's the coaching staff around the player? What teams are they playing? What's their schedule look like? There's so many things. Was their number one receiver out for 4 weeks of the 8-game stretch? There's so many things that stats do not tell you. That's why it limits the evaluation. That's why I want to watch, because if I watch the game and I'm watching, you mentioned the Colts. So, let's say I was watching Andrew Luck play quarterback, right? And then, this 4-game stretch, he really struggled. Well, T.Y. Hilton wasn't playing.
Yeah.
So, the box score doesn't tell you that. It just tells you Andrew Luck threw this many passes, he threw this many interceptions, he threw this many touchdowns. There's no context involved. And then, let's be honest, man, it also doesn't tell you what conference the guys are playing with. We just talked about Sam Ehlinger in the Big 12. There's not much defense being played in the Big 12.
No.
There just isn't, and we can compare stats all day, all long between conferences or whatever, but where are the stats being put up? I mean, I think it was Jason Pierre-Paul the one year for the Giants. He had 12 sacks, but 8 of them came in 2 games.
Yeah,
and it was he wasn't actually good that year. He just had a great 2-game stretch. It doesn't tell context, and that's what we're missing. I want to use the film. I'll rephrase this. I want to use the box score to back up what I saw in film. It's the same thing when I went to the Combine and I was able to be there in Indianapolis this year. I don't want that to tell me who's fast. I want to verify if that guy is fast or if that guy is not fast. Oh, I thought that guy was really fast. He ran 4.3. Okay, check. I was right. He's fast. Oh, that guy, I think he was a 4.3 athlete on film and he runs 4.5. Well, then I may have made a mistake. I need to go back and watch the film. That doesn't change my opinion. That just adds context and kind of summarizes if I'm right or if I'm wrong.
Let's got 2 more quarterbacks for you, Ryan. This has been fun. Kyle Trask. It's a guy, interesting story, very fun story. A guy that when I was actually watching the Kentucky game when he got put in, Felipe Franks got hurt. I believe Felipe Franks got hurt on a fourth down run. I don't think he got it. I think Kentucky stopped him. And then all I hear is Steve Levy saying, I say this because I just rewatched the game. Oh, wow, Franks is down and he's not getting up. I don't know if those are exact words, but that's kind of the context. He didn't get up. Kyle Trask comes in. First time starting, I don't believe he started a game in high school. I mean, it's the weirdest story that I've seen of a kid that comes in fully confident. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, he's a true freshman. No, this cat he could have gone into the league last year, but didn't have enough experience. Stays in school. He's ready to come again this year. What do you see? How can he improve? Just kind of give me your report on Kyle Trask.
So just to add to you a little bit, it's a really interesting story because, like you said, this guy was a backup quarterback in high school because he was on the same team as De'Aaron King. You know, he was a backup.
Funny you say that because he's the next one I'm going to ask you about.
Oh, man. All right. We're not talking to you. All right. Couple Florida guys to end it. I like it. So Trask, has been draft eligible now. This will be his third year, obviously, as a redshirt senior. So a guy that was not on the radar, was always seeming to fight for that starting spot with Felipe Franks, but didn't quite get it. And he is – I'll say it like this. He's being a beneficiary right now of being the guy after Felipe Franks because Felipe Franks is also, like Sam Ehlinger, not it. He's very, very bad. So they went from a bad quarterback to a pretty solid quarterback. They made that move, and then Florida fans, of course, and a lot of media, honestly, are like, oh, man, Kyle Trask is the real deal, because they're just so used to not good quarterback play, and they suddenly get good quarterback play, and it's like, oh, man, all right, he's good. He's really good. And in the reality, there's a lot of good things about Kyle Trask. He hits those size thresholds. I think his arm is good enough. It's very solid. I don't think he's a great athlete, but I think that there's some natural accuracy for the most part. I'm just struggling because it's the experience factor, right? Like he hasn't had those game reps. He's a slow processor right now. Can he get there? Yeah, and I totally get why some people really like Kyle Trask. I'm kind of middling with him right now just because if he doesn't improve, I'm not sure what the floor is there. I think that he could take that jump and then maybe potentially be that backup quarterback vying for starting level, play at some point. But for now, I'm just kind of in wait and see mode with Kyle Trask, but I definitely get the fascination with him. I'm really excited for him to see some more game reps because there's some talent coming back to Florida, man. We talk about Kyle Pitts at tight end, but they have some wide receivers, Kadarius Toney, Trevon Grimes. Like, there's a lot of talent there. So I'm excited to see what Trask does. I'm just in wait and see mode for him right now.
I gave the hint of who the last quarterback is. And in the website, I forget the site that I looked at earlier before Ryan and I were talking, just to kind of give a quick list of quarterbacks here. But I got down to Brock Purdy, Zach Wilson, Emory Jones. Nowhere on their list, and I know he's not on yours, De'Aaron King, a guy that was at Houston last year, a guy that when him and the receiver, I forget his name, that decided to quit after game 4 because there's a new rule that allowed them to play 4 games and then be able to redshirt, still call that a redshirt year, and then come back the next year. This is a new way for the NCAA to adapt to what's going on. And I was like, I don't like the move. I think you're quitting on your team. That's literally how I viewed it because it just seemed very odd to me about what's going on and how Houston was playing with that season. De'Aaron King goes down to Miami. He's recruited, and he's like, yeah, I'm going to be a Hurricane. And I got a buddy on Twitter, and I have seen a lot of Hurricanes be very, very excited, very happy for him to come this year. I've never been a big fan. I understand the whole Kyle Trask, De'Aaron King thing in high school. Because in high school, he works very, very well. In college, he can work very well. Waiting to see what's going to happen in this upcoming season. I mean, if you look at his stats last year, I don't remember them popping off the screen from the 4 games that he played last year. But De'Aaron King, from what you've seen, I don't believe the hype. Do you believe the hype? Why or why not?
I haven't bought into the hype for the last 2 years. I have not bought in. I get the fascination. He's an incredible athlete. There is no doubt about it. He's played slot receiver for them. He's played quarterback. And like you said, like on the high school level especially, that works. On the college level, it can work. And it did work at Houston, honestly. 2 years ago, he had a really nice season, no doubt about it. But there is just baseline accuracy that you need to have. There is baseline timing that you need to have. There is the fact of, like, yes, a smaller quarterback can play in the NFL now. We've seen it with Kyler Murray and Russell Wilson and, even Drew Brees and Baker Mayfield. Like, those guys are 6 foot, or less. So we've seen it become more of a thing. but you're still ultimately betting on an outlier if you think that it's not going to be a thing. And it's not even that the fact of like he's below 6 foot. I've heard that he might be 5'8".
Oh, wow.
So we're dealing with a very, very small quarterback. Not just small, because Russell Wilson's small. Well, I should say short. He's not small. Kyler Murray is short. Russell Wilson is short. That is really, really small. That is really short. So I get why Miami, again, it's like the Florida thing. Miami hasn't had good quarterback play in some years now. So, like, they just are like, oh, man, look at the guy stats he put over 2 years ago. And I think that he's going to do a solid job for Miami. But if we're talking from an NFL draft perspective,
right.
I wasn't buying into the hype last year. You know, if you were on Twitter last year in the quote unquote, you know, draft world or whatever, everyone was buying stock into De'Ara King because he can make a couple nice bucket throws down the field. But nah, man, I'm not there. I'm not going to be there. I think he's going to do a solid job for Miami. I don't see him as an NFL quarterback. He's a similar guy that I think there might be a position switch in his future sometime soon.
Ryan, I couldn't have you in this conversation without one before letting people know where they can catch you on Twitter. Talk about Kedon Slovis real quick. I know he's not up in 2021, but please, that's your guy. Guys, me and Ryan are talking right now via Zoom, so he has a smile on his face. Kedon Slovis real quick. Yeah, man, go at it.
I mean, so if you look at my bio on Twitter, I got it now to Kedon Slovis truther instead of Kedon Slovis for president because I didn't want anybody to come out with political, fire on me or whatever. Even though he probably would be a better president than somebody. But we'll talk about that later time. Kedon Slovis, man, it's really fun. You know, he was only a 3-star recruit, takes over from the injured JT Daniels. And then this kid comes in and this number 9, and it's like, what do we expect? And then he has a couple nice games in a row, and you're like, okay, that's awesome, man. Keeping the seat warm for JT Daniels. That's great. That's wonderful. Doesn't stop. He gets banged up at some point. I think he misses like a game or two. He comes back. He's still the same guy. He throws for like 34 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, completes like 72% of the passes. And, we're talking about box score there, but then you go watch the film. This guy has some of the best throws I've seen in the last couple years on film, man. And it's not just arm talent because he does have a nice, talented arm. It's not the strongest in the world, but it is more than good enough. But the accuracy that he has, the timing, the ability to throw from different arm angles, and the most impressive part, and I found out that he is a Kurt Warner disciple.
Oh, wow.
So it makes total sense. He's been working with Kurt Warner for a couple years. It makes total sense that from a technical perspective, he is so compact. He's ready to fire at all times. His upper body and lower body are always in a line. He is just so advanced from a mechanics perspective for a kid his age. Because he was like 18 or 19 years old playing Pac-12 football. And like, Pac-12 is not great defense. It's better than the Big 12, but it's not great. But every week, man, I saw him play against Notre Dame, and I'm like, I'm a Notre Dame fan if you didn't know. But, like, for every single drive, I'm like, dude, this number 9 is just – like, it wasn't even like – because Notre Dame won the game, but it was just like, this guy is pesky, man. Like, he just won't go away. He's keeping them in the game. And he's only a freshman. I was expecting, like, oh, we're going to, destroy this freshman. And then he just keeps coming back, man, keeps coming back. And I think that there's going to be a conversation in 2 years on – who's quarterback 1 for 2022? We're already talking about 2022, but Sam Howell from North Carolina, Jaden Daniels, the quarterback from Arizona State, all very talented. But, man, I haven't seen a kid this advanced from a footwork and just from a mechanical perspective. I haven't seen a kid this age be this good. He's just always in rhythm. He's always ready to throw. I love Kedon Slovis. I feel like if that's just what we saw for freshman year, I'm just excited to see what he does over the next couple here now.
I'm excited for him, too. You mentioned Sam Howell, Jaden Daniels. I'm excited to see football, sports. I'm excited to see anything right now. Ryan, this has been fun. We'll have you on again in the future, talk about another group of players for the 2021 draft, kind of keep this trend rolling to get us prepared. I know it's June 30th when we're recording. This will drop in a couple of days. But I know it's early. Football hasn't started yet, but we can start preparing now for what's going to happen next spring. Ryan, let people know where they can catch you, and then also talk a little bit about the podcast names and where they can catch those as well.
Sure. Yeah. So on Twitter, I'm very active, as you know, Jay. If you want to talk draft, you want to talk football, college football, NFL, anything, Rise, the letter N draft on Twitter, Rise and Draft. Again, director of scouting at NFL Draft Bible. Check out that site. Check out the handle at NFL Draft Bible. Analyst at TDDR_draft room, which is the Dynasty Draft Room. Do some content there. I'm working obviously with the Believe Podcast Network now for the NFL Draft. And then I'm also starting to write for Pro Football Network. So I'm all over the place. Just go to Rise and Draft on Twitter to follow everything that I'm doing. And, Jay, like always, man, I appreciate you inviting me on here. And it was a ton of fun to talk ball here for a little bit.
I forgot one thing. The FCS thing on June 9th. Please plug that really quick as well.
Yeah, that's a good call. Very good call. So, at NFL Draft Bible, we're doing an FCS show July 9th, 8 Eastern time. All you have to do to sign up is email myself, or you can DM me, but the email is ryan@nfldraftbible.com. We work with players from all levels. So I put together a panel of 9 to 10 guys who are All-Americans, future NFL draft picks. They're exceptional football players on the FCS level. And it is a completely free event. Just come on. It's a panel. Me and Jody Leone will be the hosts for the event. We're just going to go through some of these players. I think it's really fun because a lot of guys in the FCS, there is different circumstances for why they ended up on a quote-unquote lower level. So we're going to kind of dive into their stories a little bit. I think it's going to be really informative. I think it's going to be a ton of fun talking to some of the best players on any level, honestly. We talked about – I know Jim Nagy has been talking about some of these guys. We got Spencer Brown from Northern Iowa, who's on the Senior Bowl watch list. We got Ellerson Smith from Northern Iowa. We got Dylan Radins, the offensive tackle from North Dakota State that everyone's been talking about. So we have a great crew, a great panel. We're excited for it. Again, that is July 9th, 8 Eastern time. Email myself at ryan@nfldraftbible.com to reserve your spot.
And I will also be retweeting that video. Ryan put out a couple videos recently. I'll be retweeting that video the same day. So I'll be very active on Thursday morning when I release this episode. I'll tweet the link out to this, share Ryan's podcast, I believe Podcast Network, and then also the video of Ryan plugging FCS, the panel that he talked about. Ryan, thank you so much. In a few months, maybe 2 months, depending on how sports goes and things like that, we'll have you back on again. I'll talk about another draft group to kind of just deep dive, analyze what's good, what's not so good, who can improve, who may not. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on once again here on the Jay Stevens Podcast.
Awesome. Thanks again, Jay.
North Dakota State has found a way to form a well-oiled machine, and it churns out great talent. It churns out wins year after year after year after year after year. And this year's no different. This year they have their very talented squad. Trey Lance is just one of many guys on that squad that are very, very talented. But one thing I'm wondering is, how do they do it? How do they stay consistent? And then what in the world is it with these quarterbacks? They had Carson Wentz one, and now Trey Lance another one. Trey Lance falling under the radar. A guy is an FCS quarterback that won't get the same notoriety as a Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. But as you heard, I have heard people say Trey Lance is QB1. I have heard people say Trey Lance is QB2. The website that I mentioned in my conversation with Ryan Roberts, that website had Trey Lance as QB3 above Jamie Newman, above Kellen Mond, above Sam Ehlinger, above KJ Costello, above Tanner Morgan, above names that you're familiar with, but for some reason this cat has something that is special. You know what I like to do with people that have things that are special, that have abilities, and that are blessed with the capability to perform at a high level on the football field week after week after week after week. I like to watch their games. I like to focus on them. So there may be a good chance in the future when college football season starts that there is a Trey Lance segment here on the podcast because Ryan Roberts hyped him up. And you know what I'm going to do? Focus on him to see if Ryan Roberts and what he said about Trey Lance is true. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Jay Stevens Podcast. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. If you're not on Twitter and you would love to connect with the podcast, send your emails to jstevenspod@gmail.com. Remember to always subscribe, rate, and review. It's a great way for people that search for the podcast to listen to come across this one. Then remember to always get the word out about the podcast via word of mouth. The things that we enjoy in life, we are more willing and somewhat wired to tell other people about. So about it, if this was your first episode, or if you have been listening since episode number 1, be sure to let people know about the podcast. This has been episode 110 of the Jay Stevens Podcast. I'll see you next time.